defense is trying to go, you get caught with a holding penalty.
The dangerous Aaron Cruikshank, maybe his first shot here to return a punt.
Here comes the ready or not. Here comes the boys from the south. Here comes the ready or not. How you like me now? I say, here comes the boom, ready or not. Here comes the boys from the south. Boom, here comes the boom, ready or not. How you like me now?
Welcome to another episode of Tackling the Terps. I'm Daniel Stein. He's Ryan Martin. And Ryan, it was a special game for not only the Terp squad last Saturday, but for us because we were on the call for that game.
Yeah, such a fun experience, Daniel, to be alongside you for the Maryland-Villanova game. Maryland wins at 38-20, but just a super fun experience to be up in the broadcast booth for the first time with WMEC Sports doing football. So shout out to our station directors for that too. Oliver Shack, Tyler Lochte, and Ben Schrober for making that possible. It was a great experience. I was so excited that to be able to do it with you and had so much fun. Shout out to our spotter, Jack Wynn, too. I had a great time. What about you?
It was an absolutely amazing experience. I mean, I love football, and so just getting to be up there in Tizer Tower from above, kind of seeing the whole stadium was just amazing. And again, shout out to Ben, Oliver, and Tyler, and Jack, our spotter, for that. It was a great experience, and I'm looking forward to doing more, hopefully, in the next couple of years.
Yeah, so Maryland beats Villanova by 18, so I guess we're 1-0 on our debut for Maryland football. But it was a game that was a little bit closer than we maybe thought in the second half. Again, Maryland got off to a 24-0 lead, but Villanova climbed back a little bit in the second half. They made it interesting late, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, 38-20. I mean, that's an 18-point win, of course, like you said. But through the first half, it looked like it was just going to be a regular Maryland blowout. But in the third quarter, they really made things difficult. A couple turnovers, and they had the surprise onside kick that I think caught everyone in the stadium off guard. Mm-hmm. But in the fourth quarter, Maryland started to pull away a little bit again. But that Villanova team was tough, and they definitely showed why they were the number 5 FCS team in the entire country.
Yeah, they were. Villanova didn't go down easy, especially they put up those 20 points. So very exciting to say that it was Ryan Martin and Daniel Stein on the call for that one. And here's how it sounded on WMEC Sports for the 18-point Maryland win.
It's Parents' Weekend here in College Park, and it's a gorgeous day for football at CQ Stadium. In one corner, a squad of Terrapins looking to protect their shells and win their second in a row. Their opponent, a pack of Wildcats lurking in the shadows of the FCS and hunting for an upset win. Captain moves in motion. Edwards drops back. Looks left, now right, now throws to the end zone. Wide open touchdown! Caden Prather! What a drive for the Terps as he beats Tyrell Mims. 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. Prather closest to the Maryland sideline. Felton on the outside. They hand off. Hemby up the middle, breaks a tackle, and scores! Maryland, 2 drives, 2 touchdowns. It's Roman Hemby, and the Terps up 13-0 here in the first quarter.
Should be about a 33-yard attempt from the left-footed Getman. The snap is up, the kick is up as well, but it's blocked by Maryland. Maryland gets a piece of it, and still preserving the shutout is the Terps. Maryland takes over on the blocked field goal. It is Taze Johnson on the right side, I formation, and dotting it is going to be Ray. Ray gets a handoff from the 1-yard line, makes one defender miss, and dives his way into the end zone. Nolan Ray, his second touchdown on the season. 3 receivers right. Pump fake and a handoff. It'll be kept with McDonald. McDonald all the way down. It's popped out. The ball is lost by McDonald, and it's picked up by Isis Waxter.
3rd down and goal. Watkins drops back, looks right, feeling the pressure, still rolling, and now he's sacked. Tommy Akingbasote brings him down closer to the 20-yard line at the Maryland 15. Watkins takes the snap in the shotgun, now steps up, looking into the end zone. He's got a man. Devin Smith for the Villanova touchdown. They're going to bring both of the linebackers in. Edwards drops back on a 3rd and 9. Looks down the field. It is caught. Dylan Wade, his first catch of the game. Wade taking defenders all the way down to the 25-yard line before he's finally tackled by Jalen Goodman. In the shotgun, Edwards looks left, throws left, looking for Ty Felton. Did he make the catch? Yes, he did. Touchdown, Maryland. Ty Felton does it again.
22-yard line. Free play for Billy Edwards Jr. on the jump. Goes deep for Ty Felton. Goes up. Makes a catch at the 50. Stiff arm at the 40. 30, 25, 20. Ty Felton finally dragged down the free play to perfection for Billy Edwards. His longest pass of the day. In motion is Smith. Be a handoff to Ray. Instead, it's going to be pulled back by Morris. Morris looking for the left pylon. Down all the way. Knocked out of bounds at the one, but first he gets his hand to the pylon. MJ Morris in for the 14-yard score. Fake to Eli Smith. Here's a rollout by Maddox. Stutter steps on the right side, looking to keep it and run. Maddox makes one move, makes a defender miss, and in for the touchdown. Tanner Maddox, an 8-yard scramble down the right near side. No FCS trap game here for the Terrapins, beating Villanova 38-20. Maryland moving to 3-1 on the season.
So those were the highlights from the game, and now let's take a look to see what Coach Locks and Billy Edwards Jr. had to say after the game.
From the Villanova game, it's obviously we're better than the way we played as a team, and that's where we'll be a team that continues to get better and continues to fix things as we go along. And that's the beauty, and that's what I really like about coaching, because if they did it right, they wouldn't need me.
Yeah, it feels good, but I think, a lot of guys in the locker room have the mindset of, we're not satisfied. We obviously have a lot of things we want to clean up, whether it's individually, offense, defense, special teams, whatever. So I think, we're on a good mindset where we'll come back, we'll have the 24-hour rule. We'll come back tomorrow afternoon, Monday afternoon, and, flush it and get on to the next.
So that was head coach Mike Locksley and starting quarterback Billy Edwards Jr. on the win against Villanova. Maryland moves to 3-1 on its season. So, Daniel, the first third of Maryland's season already in the books. We just heard from Billy Edwards Jr. It was a pretty good game as well for the redshirt junior starting quarterback. He was picking apart the Wildcat defense.
Yeah, 28 of 32, 328 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the 1 interception. But Ryan, I'm not sure if that was really his fault. He set a record for completion percentage, I believe 88% completion, and he just continues to, I think, get better as a passer, and he was picking apart that Villanova defense. He made some really nice throws. Most of them were short, but as the game went on, he started to let loose a little bit. The one that comes to mind for me is the free play where he hit the 61-yard pass to Ty Felton. But overall, just another really good game from Billy.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought he came out of the gate playing really strong, completed each of his first 5 passes. This is a Maryland offense that it really couldn't be stopped early, and I think we finally saw Billy being comfortable and fully, whether it was rushing the ball, looking short, or past that 10 to 12-yard mark too, where he was starting to air out the ball a little bit more. I think this was the most comfortable that Edwards Jr. looked. Yes, it comes against an FCS opponent on Parents Weekend, and this was a game Maryland was expected to win even by a little bit more than the 18 points that they won by. But I was impressed by Billy Edwards Jr. a lot. I like how he got some different receivers involved, ended up being 9 different receivers coming down with the catch in this game. So there was one receiver in particular who shined, kind of like he's been shining all season long. But I like what Edwards Jr. did as a passer in this game.
Yeah, and Ty Felton, of course, the big receiver yet again, 14 catches, 157 yards, and a touchdown. He's just breaking all sorts of Maryland records, and if he keeps this season going, he could be knocking on the door for some national records too. You never really know. Of course, in the press conference we were there, people were there. There were a couple murmurs about the Theismann.
Yep.
Could this be one of those kinds of seasons? Of course, that remains to be seen. But again, you talk about a guy who's so good after the catch, but yet his reception numbers are up there with any other possession receiver. 14 catches for Felton just proves that how good of a all-around receiver he's becoming.
Yeah, I think he's that safety blanket for Edwards Jr. We saw him used a lot by offensive coordinator Josh Gaddis and Locksley in the short game too. So some of them were checkdowns, screen passes. They did get a couple air out throws to Felton. But I like how Billy Edwards Jr. comes in. Remember, Talia Tagovailoa was a 4-year starter for Maryland. We're talking about since pre-COVID, last time Maryland had a quarterback change. So for Felton to come in, I think, and be that guy already for Edwards Jr., the numbers speak for themselves. But I think Billy Edwards Jr. has needed that. And time again, Felton has been able to produce. The biggest question now is non-conference is over for Maryland football. You got Indiana coming up on Saturday. How can Maryland keep Felton involved and keep him being at this level of production? All of a sudden, these Big Ten teams know exactly who you want to take away, because he's been one of the nation's best wide receivers over 4 weeks.
Yeah, he definitely has. Statistically, he's right up there with any other receiver in the country. I think when we start to get into Big Ten play, though, something that obviously the Big Ten teams are going to understand is, okay, this guy is red hot right now. We're going to cover him more. I think something that Billy can do is just, this would take off pressure on him too, is Ty Felton's best attribute, in my opinion, is his ability after the catch. So if we're setting up Billy Edwards to make these kind of easy throws to Felton, he's going to do a lot of the work himself after the catch. So not every throw needs to be that 40-yard pass to Felton, and then especially those opportunities are going to dwindle when you're playing against more Big Ten competition. So I think that's something they can do to still get him involved.
Yeah, and you look at Felton's numbers again, 604 receptions, receiving yards. It's third in the country. He's second in the country with 41 receptions. So Felton has been everywhere. Daniel, one thing I really liked about this win against Villanova was how we saw the rushing game get involved too. 3 rushing touchdowns. Maryland had that number as well against UConn in week 1. But it was an everybody eats mentality, and I think that helped out the passing game a lot too. We saw Nolan Ray score, Roman Hemby, even MJ Morris came in, and I think that's exactly where they want to use him, is in that Billy role that we saw last year with a lot of RPOs and running flexibility. So I like this running game too, and setting up Felton, setting up Edwards Jr. I think it was a big part of this win too that might get overlooked with the final score.
Yeah, I mean, 3 different runners scored in this game. MJ Morris, obviously a QB, but he had a rushing touchdown. Hemby had a rushing touchdown. Nolan Ray did as well. They're both short yardage, but still 168 yards on the ground is no joke. And I think what it really did is allowed Billy to get more comfortable generally, yes, but in particular on third downs when they had to throw for it, the distance was not, more than 12 yards. And even when it was that length, the 8, 9, 10 yards, Billy could do his thing. The one that comes to mind for me is the rollout throw to Dylan Wade down the field in that third quarter. It just allows, again, when you have a quarterback like Billy Edwards, where he's coming into the season with expectations not to throw for thousands and thousands of yards. Of course, he's been fantastic this year, but you want to set him up to where he doesn't have to carry the team. And I think that's what they did, to your point, with the 168 rushing yards.
I think that's a big part of it. I think, again, you're going into Big Ten play, so the playtime's over, as they used to say. And we got to really see how these guys can start doing and really getting a balance between passing and a rushing attack. Especially, again, you got to assume that Felton's numbers are going to decrease during Big Ten competition. One unit's numbers that hopefully will stay the same for their sake. It's this defense, Daniel. How about what we saw from Maryland defensively? 3 sacks on the game. That's the most in a game so far this year. They held Villanova to 0 for 5 on third downs in the first half. What specifically about this defense impressed you against Villanova from Maryland?
I think the secondary was pretty good considering the scheme they're playing against. Villanova, of course, runs the ball pretty well, and there's more to be said about the D-line, of course, for the Terps. But the way that I was looking at the game when we were doing it, Ryan, was they kept running this kind of spread offense where they have 4, 5, even like 6 receivers out there. So a lot of the times you're leaving these corners and sometimes linebackers and safeties in one-on-one looks. And so what happened was you had guys like Jalen Sanchez for Villanova, who really tough deep threat receivers with a lot of speed, but the Maryland corners were staying with them, and they did get penalized a couple times, and that's something that Loxley was, of course, not very happy about. But I think they really didn't allow that many big plays through the air. I think Sanchez had that one touchdown that got called back, and Devin Smith had the touchdown in the end zone, or in the red zone, I should say. But overall, I think the secondary deserves a certain amount of credit.
I think you're right on that. I think the penalties are a big thing. It's the second consecutive game. Maryland has 8 penalties. I felt like time and time again we were repeating ourselves when it would be 3rd and long. Villanova airs it out with Connor Watkins, 3-year starter for the Wildcats. They air it out deep, and Maryland just gets flagged for a pass interference, and that just can't happen, especially against FCS opponents. But you got to start realizing those mistakes the first time. That happened 2 or 3 times, I think, for this Maryland team. So that secondary was tested, but I was very impressed as well with the front 7. I think we really saw Watkins have limited time as a passer in this game. He had to get the ball out really quickly, if he even got it out at all. Again, I mentioned those 3 sacks. Watkins also an RPO threat too. It's something that they like to use in this offense. And that was nullified by, I think, the defensive line and then those linebackers coming in, shading early, and not really letting Watkins get into a zone in which he had the flexibility to run the ball.
Yeah, and Watkins was a difficult quarterback in particular because he could throw and run the ball. Yeah. I mean, there were so many highlights of him earlier in the season, like hurdling dudes in the open field. Like, he was not your average, like, pocket passing quarterback. And I think the Maryland defensive line, I should say, really was good within, like, 20 yards to the end zone. And that's not just when they're on their back heels. This is when they had Villanova pinned. The defensive line would get pressure on Watkins, forcing him to make inaccurate throws and even bringing him down. I mean, 3 sacks, it's a season high for them, and this Maryland defensive line, I think, has just gotten better as the season has gone on.
Yeah, you're right. I think they were up for the challenge, too. As you mentioned, I like what you're saying about getting better at the right time for the Maryland defense. Yeah, Watkins, 12 completed passes and 12 rushing attempts. those 12 rushing attempts for Watkins, only going for 12 yards overall. So this defense came to play. Offense did its thing. Daniel, what would your grade be on this Week 4 matchup?
I had this game as a B+, and it was interesting because I wasn't exactly expecting it, but after the game, there's an article in the Diamondback, I believe from Brandon Schwartzberg, about how Maryland won the game by 18 points, but they felt like they could have won by more. And honestly, I think that they're being a little bit too hard on themselves. I don't think that this was a bad game by any means. Again, one turnover is, I guess they had one passing turnover, one rushing turnover. So those are, I think, the worst parts of the game on offense. But if you look past that, there's really not much to complain about. I think if you're a Maryland fan, even the most pessimistic ones, you still got a really good performance from Billy Edwards. You got another great performance from Ty Felton. You got nearly 170 yards on the ground, and the defense came to play. Really, the only time Villanova swung momentum back into the game on their side was when they hit an onside kick that, as I said before, nobody in the entire shell was expecting. When that play first happened, I didn't even think it was legal because I was just like, how are you running this right now? But that's basically the only thing that they did that kept Maryland kind of on its heels. So I think it's a B+. It's not a perfect game, but it's still a win, and it's a good game.
I agree with you on about 90% of the things you say. I think it's a good win, a good game. There were some aspects that we didn't see Maryland struggle yet this season, and they struggled against Villanova. I'm going to give this one a B grade, just for a couple of reasons. We saw the first fumble of the season, Colby McDonald, in a terrible position. They were less than 10 yards to go. Maryland had it right before the half. They've been actually not that great playing right before the half. You had Calandria, who scored for Virginia in that UVA game. And then in the loss to Michigan State, the Spartans had a field goal at the very last second before halftime. So I just think that that's an area that I want to see cleaned up. Again, Edwards Jr. throws the interception, the pass interference, the Glendon Miller helmet off. That was stuff that Loxley talked about. We just got to be better at that overall. So B, I think this is a good win against an FCS team. A lot of places to grow on too, especially going into Indiana.
Yeah, and they're facing an Indiana team that, although they destroyed them last year, it's going to be a stronger Indiana team, I should say, because the Hoosier squad is 4-0 on the season, I believe. They're undefeated, and now the Terps have to go to Bloomington to play them, and so this is not going to be the same team they faced last year.
No, it certainly won't be. And in terms of finishing up this recap on Villanova, some guys who will need to be important for Maryland in that game against Indiana. Let's give our offensive and defensive players of the game first. And we'll start with you. Offensively, who did you like in this game? Who is your offensive player of the game?
I mean, I'm trying not to repeat myself, but it's virtually a tie for me between Billy Edwards and Ty Felton. I think the edge goes to Billy Edwards just because he continues to impress me. The narratives going into the season of he can't throw the ball, he's a runner, and time in and time out, he continues to prove them wrong. And I understand that these are all non-conference games, but the consistency that he's shown so far has been great, and also improving in areas that he was, not exactly expected to improve in coming into the season. The completion percentage, just the high rate that he's completing these passes, and the deep passing too. I think Loxley understands that he had one or two of those what he called Billy balls, and they're drawing back on the deep passing because they know that that's not exactly his strength, but when they do pass deep, he's hitting the throws now. And so I think that for me, he's the offensive player of the game, and that's honestly not because of anything bad Ty Felton did. It's just because Felton continues to do this in every game this year that it's almost the boring pick at this point.
Right. Yeah, the tie does not go to Ty. I like that. 14. He did have 14 catches, a career high for Ty Felton. Edwards Jr., though, new career high, 328 passing yards, and then set that school program record, or the single game program record, I should say, with 88% completion percentage. I like the pick with Edwards Jr. there, and I think defensively, we'll give it to a new guy here. How about the game we saw from Tommy Aking-Basote on the front line? Had 2 tackles for loss, a big sack, if you remember, on third, and I want to say it was about 9, Villanova in Maryland's red zone. I like the play from Aking-Basote, who's become a real leader for Maryland on the front seven. So we already talked about how great the front seven was. I think Aking-Basote was a huge part about that too. Again, this was a great Maryland defense. We didn't even talk about that field goal block that Maryland had as well in the first half. Aking-Basote not in it on that play, but in virtually almost every other play, it felt like, defensively for Maryland.
Yeah, and I think the defensive line was an area that needed to step up, and they've been going in the right direction. But Aking-Basote, sacking the quarterback for any interior defensive lineman is not necessarily your thing, unless you're Aaron Donald, of course. But again, what the interior line did to stop the run was good enough. But again, as you said, when they got deeper into Maryland territory and when they were backed up in their own territory, Villanova, that is, the Maryland defensive line, and especially Tommy Akingbasote came to play. He made some really impressive plays, not only sacking the quarterback, but just constantly pressuring Watkins. His pursuit to the quarterback was something that I hadn't seen all season long, and I think that's why he's the defensive MVP.
Could be a scary defensive line, too, if you get Quayshawn Fuller going as well. Taze Johnson, we saw captain of this game, and Akingbasote came to play in the middle and will be needed again when you look around this Big Ten landscape. Around the Big Ten this week, we're actually going to have two teams, Daniel, playing in the first ranked matchup against Big Ten teams this year. It was Illinois beating Nebraska and Michigan beating USC. A fun week around the Big Ten. Daniel, some scary teams overall, ranked and in the Big Ten Conference.
Yeah, the Big Ten, it's shaping up to just be the powerhouse that it's always been for the last 5 or so years. The Michigan-USC matchup was a really interesting one because it was in the big house, but USC came to play. Michigan's still kind of trying to figure out its identity on offense with Alex Orji in there, not really throwing the ball that much, but they were able to eke out the win with some of that patented Michigan defense. And then how about that Illinois-Nebraska game? And of course, I'm going to be biased because I'm from Illinois, but Dylan Raiola is one of the most fun players in the Big Ten right now to watch. As a true freshman, slinging the ball like he does, it's really rare to see that, especially at the quarterback position. But credit to Illinois, man. They just are a solid team down there in Champaign, and they're doing a really good job competing in a Big Ten conference that really doesn't have any slouches.
Yeah, Illinois and Michigan both beat Maryland last season, will not face the Terps this year. But you mentioned there was some great quarterback play, a really interesting dynamic. Luke Altmaier, too, 4 touchdown passes for Illinois in that win. Raiola is going to be special for years to come. Excited to see him, especially when they play Maryland. And then, Michigan just out Michigan, I think was the broadcasters were saying on the call. Really grounded and pounded. And that game, was all Michigan's in the first half. USC came back a little bit towards the end there, but 2 good teams to watch out for. If you are Maryland, just always keep your eye around the conference. But it's going to be important to keep the eye on the conference because this is conference play rest of the regular season. It starts with Indiana on Saturday. Maryland, a 3-1 record, will travel to Bloomington against a Hoosier team, Daniel, that did get some votes. Unofficially, the number 27 team in the AP Top 25 poll. Again, not in the 25, but they got the second most votes for a team that wasn't in the poll. So Maryland at Indiana, 4-0 with the Hoosiers under new head coach Curt Cignetti. Daniel, what are you thinking about this Week 5 matchup? Maybe any predictions between Maryland and Indiana?
I think that this game is going to be, as I'm sure everyone in the Maryland, in Jones Hill House expects, it's going to be close, right? This Indiana team is turning heads. They're a very, very formidable squad. They're not ranked, but again, this is, I think, like a dress-up game for the harder games to come after this one, because they play Northwestern at home. That's the blackout game. That should be a win, but then you get USC. Then you get Oregon 2 weeks later. Then Iowa and Penn State to finish off the season. I think this Indiana game is going to be really pivotal because I think we're just going to be able to see what exactly this Maryland team is. If the offense continues to perform like they have against the non-conference teams, then, well, maybe we're looking at like an 8-win team this year. But if they come out kind of slow and can't really work against a tough Indiana team, then maybe we're looking at a less talented team, Maryland team, I should say, than in previous years. But I think it's going to be very close, and Maryland needs to make sure they tighten up on those issues that they saw in Villanova. Can't have as many penalties. They can't have the carelessness as which the penalties happened. I think that's what I'm going to be looking for.
Yeah, I think those are some really good things to look at. Again, these penalties just adding up between the 2 last games at Virginia and then at home against Villanova. And we brought up that already, but Maryland, a shellacking of Indiana last time out. The Hoosiers came to Maryland, lost 44-17. Tagovailoa, 5 touchdowns, a career game too for Ty Felton. Felt like the Ty Felton numbers we see this year. 7 catches, 134 yards, a career high 3 touchdowns against the Hoosiers last time out. But this is a completely new Indiana team, as you were talking about. And this could be a big test for both teams. Really feels like maybe the first test that Indiana has all season. The Hoosiers 4-0 and have scored at least 31 points in every game. So I'm expecting a high-scoring battle here. I do think Indiana will win. And I'll start with my predicted touchdown score and final score. I think Indiana is going to win this one, 35-26. And how about a little different change? So we talked before showing about maybe we don't repeat the touchdown scores that we had picked, or we'll find a time to reset it. Give me, instead of, I was thinking, I haven't picked Ty Felton. I didn't pick Billy Edwards for a rushing touchdown. I said, scrap all of that. Give me the Maryland defense to score in this game. The Terps have not scored a touchdown since Glendon Miller had a pick 6 in the Music City Bowl. Something tells me against this offense of Indiana. Curtis Rourke's been great for them as quarterback, but I think it's just time for Maryland to get a defensive touchdown. I could see it being a high-scoring battle and Maryland getting at least 6 points, pick 6, fumble return. Something's going to happen defensively. Watch out for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Maryland team that didn't really get the turnovers they wanted last week versus Villanova, and Coach Locks has been talking about the turnovers all this season, and of course, they've been really good at it. So I think that's a solid prediction, getting them back into the swing of things as far as turnovers go. I'm going to be more optimistic. I'll say Maryland wins this one. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as you. I think it'll be 24-21, something in that vein. I think it's just going to be close the whole way through. And as far as who I think is going to score, give me Preston Howard. Okay. I'm 1 for 1 on tight ends this season with Dylan Wade. And Preston Howard looked a lot more alive in this game versus Villanova. They were using him in the offense a little more. I think the one play that I remember was the seam route up the middle that Edwards hit him on. I think something like that. They used Corey Dyches in that way last year a lot, kind of working the middle of the field. So look for Preston Howard to score at some point in the Indiana game.
Yeah, he had that big first down play, I remember, midway through the game. So excited to see what he does. I think that's a good prediction. I'm a little bit nervous about this Indiana secondary. I've watched them a little bit, seeing the stats. Is this an Indiana secondary that's just played against teams like FAU, Charlotte, and Western Illinois? Or is this a real Hoosiers team that has not allowed Daniel get this more than 56 passing yards to any receiver in any of the 4 games this season? And that came in the 77-3 win over Western Illinois. So a lot of bench pieces there gave up 56 receiving yards to a wide receiver on Western Illinois. We'll have to see here. Maybe if Felton's limited, I could see Preston Howard getting involved like that. But it should be a fun one nonetheless in Bloomington.
Yeah, 56 passing yards, that's not that much. But Ty Felton had a 61-yard catch, so
he did.
Anything's possible, I guess.
Especially with Felton this year on his Theismann campaign. We'll have to keep watching. We'll see what happens there. But that will do it here for episode 4 of Tackling the Terps. Recapped the win against Villanova and previewed what will be Maryland's 5th game of the season coming up against Indiana. That game will be at noon on Bloomington. You can listen to Tyler Lochte and Jack Bowman on WMEC Sports. They'll have the call for that one. But for here at Tackling the Terps, our producer and director, Gibby Hurt, and my partner, Daniel Stein, I'm Ryan Martin. And thanks for tuning in.